Thanks for joining us today for BIB Today, the daily business podcast from the newsroom of business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. We live in an interesting paradox right now in which there is some sense of financial security and optimism in the pandemic, and yet also a profound financial anxiety. A recent BMO index found that 39% of Canadians are feeling more financially secure today than they were a year ago, and 76% are feeling optimistic about their financial future over the next year. Yet, there is also anxiety about certain elements of what we're spending our money on or what we need to spend money on. Wong is Vice President of Financial Planning at BMO, Bank of Montreal, and she joins me now to talk about the survey. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Kirk. I'm excited to be here.
It is an interesting paradox, isn't it? I mean, people are feeling not too bad, and yet really bad.
Well, I think we're about a year into the pandemic, so definitely sentiment has changed from about a year ago. Things are starting to normalize a little bit more, but there's certainly still, there's the optimism, and then there's still the anxiety that's still happening with what's happening with the pandemic.
Is there a direct link, you think, between the pandemic and financial anxieties? I remember, before the pandemic, we were a little concerned that maybe we were heading into some sort of a recession or an economic downturn of some sort. Is the pandemic to blame?
Well, I think the pandemic has thrown us all into a world of uncertainty, and so I would say there's two impacts of the pandemic in terms of Canadians and their financial stress and anxiety. The first would be the actual impact that the pandemic has had for Canadians. We are spending less on, we have less discretionary spending on, travel, on maybe perhaps eating out and, gym expenses perhaps, but we could be finding that we have new expenses since the pandemic, things like, medical expenses, things like digital upgrades for students having to work from home or learn from home, or workers having to work from home. And of course, there's the impact of those in the industries that have been impacted the most by the pandemic, and those and what the financial pressure that COVID has done for their financial pressures. And then the second part would be the mental anxiety that the pandemic has brought. And, we've used this word a lot already, uncertainty. It's just brought a lot of uncertainty in terms of the markets, in terms of the economy, in terms of how long is this pandemic going to go on for, and what we need to do to be able to make sure that we're okay through it.
Yeah. It seems that if you go back a few years, Canadians were always being told to have some savings set aside in case of an emergency. Have some finances set aside in case of an emergency. Now it seems as if that has shifted to have some finances set aside in case of uncertainty here. Is that what it's translated into?
Well, emergency, the emergencies, you want to be prepared for emergencies, and that already is some uncertainty. Is this emergency going to come up? Is it not? And so what I would say is, our financial planners are now having conversations based on the same type of emergencies, but now it's really making sure that in any given circumstance that you're going to be okay. And so, as we take our clients through financial planning conversations, we're really talking about specific scenarios like, how does inflation impact you? If interest rates start to rise, how does that affect your mortgage payments? And how is that going to affect your overall financial plan? And how long will your emergency funds work? And also, is it your savings enough for emergency funds? Do we need to look at other ways of making sure that you have some sources for emergency relief? So it's really talking about that uncertainty, and it really comes down to the individual in terms of what they require for their individual financial situation.
And it sounds as if what your financial planners are doing with customers for BMO is to try to provide a little bit of definition to that unknown piece, just so that you can quantify what you might be really discussing here? Because the mind will play a trick on you, won't it? If you can't provide some definition about it, you can always be in this realm of uncertainty and unknown and fear that you won't have enough to deal with it.
Well, if I think back to about a year ago when the pandemic really became prevalent in Canada and in BC, our financial planners were relying on previous financial plans that they did with their clients in terms of, okay, so we're in this pandemic, stay the course and you're going to be okay for the long term, or we need to make some changes to your financial planning, to your savings, to maybe your spending. Let's talk about budgets. But we really referred back to the financial plan, and that's why it's so important to, if you don't have a financial plan yet, talk to a financial planner to get a plan in place. If you do have a financial plan, it's always good to review on an annual basis, but also when moments like these life event changes, and it's not just the pandemic, things like, buying a home, having a baby, things like that. Always review your financial plan to see what impact it has had and whether you do need to make some changes.
Yeah, well, this has been a phenomenal year, as you know, and I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the stock market went nuts. We were uncertain about whether we were going to have any financial support out of government for wages or for job losses or for any number of things, for your rents and things like that. Is this in a way, are these seismic events over the last year in terms of our overall financial setting going, do you think, cause Canadians to take up different behaviors about their approaches to money?
Absolutely. I think more and more Canadians are looking to not just the investment planning, but also the financial planning piece of their overall financial situation. You talk about the stock markets. It's very easy just to talk about what you're invested in, but it's really important to connect that investment planning with the financial planning. And what I would also say is becoming more of a topic of conversations that may have been caused some anxiety in the past to bring up was estate and will planning, trust planning, whatever is needed to make sure that your entire financial situation is taken care of, not just, again, the investment planning. So very important to add that financial planning piece.
Is it, do you think, making Canadians a little more conservative or just a little more disciplined?
Disciplined, not necessarily conservative. I think the uncertainty definitely puts some fear into Canadian investors. And so we have had lots of conversations about risk in terms of your investment portfolio, but definitely it's more keeping, you can have a fantastic financial plan, but really it's that execution that's key, and working with a financial planner to help with that execution and that discipline of your financial plan is extremely important in order to make sure you're okay.
How do you explain the housing market, Ivy? There's one where it's not conservative at all. And yet, obviously, some people feel that there is a discipline to an investment in a house right now, even though the prices are starting to run away again on us.
Well, I think in BC, particularly in BC, we view housing as part of our investment portfolio. So that hasn't changed. I think what has changed is, as I mentioned, we're actually saving a lot more as Canadians because we're spending less on discretionary expenses, and so perhaps that savings is allowing Canadians to partake more in other types of investments. We're also seeing people invest their cash in terms of in investment portfolios as well as the housing portfolio. So I think it's just a matter of surplus savings and making some decisions on what Canadians are wanting to do with their surplus savings.
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of people spend money unconsciously. I mean, they're not really all that clear about what their purposes are for it, and it's not all that well considered, not all that well planned. So I want to get a sense from you about what are some of the early signs of financial stress that we ought to be aware of with ourselves.
Well, I think it's important to know that everyone deals with financial stress in their own individual ways, and how they show or react will be different from one another. Some common behaviors that could be a sign of financial stress is losing sleep, lacking focus, unable to carry out normal tasks, and avoiding talking about your finances and avoiding addressing any concerns that you may have about your finances. Those would be some signs of financial stress.
Yeah. How do you know, though, that that is a financial stress and not just some kind of pandemic related stress? That's very difficult to parse those two.
Well, I think today, the pandemic stress obviously adds to the financial stress that we're feeling, and so there's two ways that we can work through our financial stress, and that would be ourselves, what we can do ourselves. It would be first acknowledging that there could be some financial stress happening in our lives. Taking a look at your own expenses and seeing should we be doing something differently? How are we spending our money during the pandemic? And then the other is to work with a professional BMO financial planner who can lead you through our financial planning tool, input some of the numbers that are individual to you as an individual, and see, is there financial stress happening in terms of your goals, achieving your goals, in terms of short-term cash flow. And it's not unlike going to the doctors. You want to make sure that you get a financial checkup from a professional to make sure that you are healthy financially in any given moment. And that's why we really recommend a yearly review, but also whenever a life event happens. And the pandemic has been a life event for everybody. And so everyone should now really be, if you haven't already, be reviewing their own financial plan.
Yeah. Have the professionals at places like BMO shifted a little bit about how they're dealing with customers in terms of the kinds of discussions that are had now? That because these are very unusual times, they call for maybe a different approach or different technique and all of it. Are we seeing a kind of a change on your side of the table as well in terms of the way that these issues are being broached and discussed?
Well, you brought up the BMO Real Financial Progress Index, and that's actually newly launched in February of this year. And it's really an indicator of how consumers are feeling about their personal finances and whether they are actually making financial progress. But really what it also does is it sparks dialogue, just like what you and I are having, to help consumers talk about a topic that causes financial anxiety, but allows an open forum to talk about, a difficult topic like money. And so we were able to get some statistics out of it. You mentioned a few, 39% of Canadians are feeling more financially secure than they were a year ago. But we also found the sources of Canadians' financial anxiety. No surprise that COVID is top on the list, but there's also, the fear of unknown expenses. 43% was causing anxiety. There's also, family-related expenses, housing costs, and so knowing this has allowed us to have better conversations with our clients, and knowing, what are some common fears that they may have had some anxiety bringing up to us as professionals, we're able to really dive deep with our clients. So I would say, what's changed is we're having financial planning conversations. That hasn't changed, but we're having probably deeper financial planning conversations with an emotional element to it to really make our clients feel secure, financially secure.
I want to talk also today about what mistakes people make when they're dealing with their financial stresses. What do you see at BMO that people make? Is it a rash investment? Is it pulling out of an investment in a rash way? Is it more of a paralysis where you don't do something when you ought to be doing something? What are the common ways that people make their mistakes in this context?
I think the most common mistake would be acknowledging that the financial stress or financial anxiety that someone may be feeling. The other would be staying on course, and that will lead to different behaviors, such as the ones that you just spoke about, buying on impulse. You mentioned the housing market. People are taking advantage of our low interest rates, and we really want to make sure that, those that want to partake in the housing market, absolutely. But does it make sense for you, for your financial plan? Those are the type of conversations we want to help our clients with. So there's definitely, staying the course is definitely the hardest mistake that an investor can make. And so talking to your financial planner again, and being honest, there's things that change in our lives, and we need to communicate that in order to see whether it fits into our financial plan.
Yeah. Is this, do you notice a difference in generations around this? Is there some age-related differences in the way that people are approaching these issues at the moment?
Yes, I think our conversations align to an age difference in terms of optimism. But the BMO Real Financial Progress Index also indicated that millennials and Gen Y tend to be more financially optimistic and more positive, whereas those 65 plus are feeling a little less financially secure.
Is it that because they don't feel like there is an opportunity for growing their investments in the near term, and they feel there's a sort of a finite amount of time in order to do that? Right?
Yes, that definitely is a factor. There's also, again, I mentioned, estate and will planning, making sure their families are taken care of. That's definitely, that topic has come to mind a lot more for the 65 plus and older generation.
So they're concerned that they're not going to be able to take care of their families in this way. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily not to take care, but making sure more so now that their financial affairs are in order, that things are in place. So it goes back to that, the mental impact that the pandemic has had on Canadians. And, again, Canadians are thinking a little bit more about their finances and their overall financial situation, and making sure that everything is in order.
Yeah. Last point on this. I mean, when I see the kind of messaging that comes from financial institutions about people's prospects, about their financial situations, I think people are given a bit of a positive message out of financial institutions and all of this. How do you think the messaging needs to be in these uncertain times, when you're taking a look at what your own client base is telling you in all of this? Is there a need to be as realistic as possible about some of the uncertainties, and not trying to gloss them over? Because when I hear you talk about housing, for instance, and how people are taking advantage of low interest rates. I mean, we all know that those low interest rates won't last forever. They'll at some point they'll change. We know that inflation won't be under control forever. There'll be something there. So in a way, I guess what I'm trying to conclude with here is what do you think is the overall tone that you think that Canadians need to have in these times from their financial institutions about how to go about their planning, their approach, their purpose with their savings and with their investments?
Well, so the conversation should be when you're talking to a professional is, what is it that you're wanting to achieve in terms of, goals, in terms of, family, all of the important factors for an individual, and how are we going to achieve those in a way that does not cause a lot of financial anxiety or financial stress, and having a clear path along the way. That would be the message I would send to all Canadian investors. And part of that plan, again, it's about adapting to changes. And if the pandemic has also done anything for us, it's caused a lot of us to have to learn to adapt quite quickly. And so some of those financial decisions you made in the past may not be the best decision at this point. And so it's revisiting that plan over and over again. You just want to make sure that whatever goals you want to achieve, you're communicating that with your professional, just like you would a doctor, and working together to achieve those goals.
Yeah. You've given us a lot of advice today. I think it's been great. I think a lot of investors and a lot of basic consumers would be able to get a lot out of what we've said. And I want to thank you for your time today, Ivy.
No problem. Thank you, Kirk.
Ivy Wong is with the Bank of Montreal, BMO. She is the Vice President of Financial Planning. You've been watching BIV Today. I'm Kirk LaPointe. Thanks a lot. We'll see you again.